Hello once again. We are talking about chapter 7 of the text today, which deals with comparison and contrast, setting things side by side just to see how they stack up. How are they similar? How are they different? The method. Comparison and contrast is a comparison of similarities and differences between subjects. Subjects may be similar, but not exactly alike. Which is better, steak or chicken? Steak. Oh, I didn't say that. Anyway, what is the purpose behind this style of writing? To explain similarities and differences between two things, not necessarily calling one better than the other. Can be sometimes, like steak or chicken, but not always. To choose between two things. This is an evaluation, choosing one thing over the other and explaining why. This is a very common occurrence in the working world. You may, in your job, be asked to compare and evaluate several different types of whatever, machinery, software programs, administrative policies. You may be asked to compare and contrast any of those and make a recommendation as to what policy to follow, or what program to purchase, or what machine to buy, and why. The process, how we actually go through a comparison and contrast. You need to make sure your subjects have something significant in common. Steak and chicken are different, obviously, but they both are meat. It is comparison between subjects that seem unlikely sometimes. You can use analogies to equate two unlikely subjects. For example, if you were asked to write a paper on how the human eye works, you might compare it to how a camera works. Most of us are not medically talented individuals, so you might lose us a little bit when discussing how the eye works, but a lot of us, not most of us, have used a camera before, so we kind of understand a little bit how cameras work, so comparing the two might give us a better understanding of how the human eye works. The basis for comparison and your thesis. Limit your comparison and contrast to manageable topics. More likely than not, when you're given a writing assignment, you're given some rather specific guidelines. This many words or these many pages, single space, double space, so much time given to get it done, 3 days, 2 weeks, you name it. You have to make sure that you can handle your topic within those specific guidelines. For example, the American way of life versus the Russian way of life is rather broad. That would be a rather time-consuming project, to say the least. So, how do you make that huge, ginormous topic manageable? Something you can get your head and your hands around. Well, take one aspect of life, education, for example, and compare the way Americans handle education versus the way Russians handle education. Your comparisons will help clarify and shape the main idea, your thesis. Okay? The process, organization. There are a couple of different ways to do a comparison and contrast piece. You can do it subject by subject. Take one subject and discuss it in its entirety, and then do the same for the second subject. Everything good and bad about steak, then everything good and bad about chicken, for example. Or you can go point by point. Take one item at a time and compare it to each subject. Taste. Talk about how steak tastes. Then talk about how chicken tastes. Texture. Talk about the texture of steak. Then the texture of chicken. Cost. How expensive is steak? How expensive is chicken? So either do each subject in its entirety one at a time, or take each point that you want to cover one at a time and compare both subjects under each point. But you have to maintain a sense of balance and flexibility. If you talk about one thing concerning a subject, you have to talk about that same thing with the other subject as well. For example, if you talk about the cost of steak, you need to talk about the cost of chicken as well. If you want to be fair and equitable in your comparison and contrast, you need to make sure that you address all issues with each subject. Don't leave one out. Flexibility is rather an ebb and flow, going back and forth on each topic. That's kind of the point by point analysis rather than subject by subject analysis. Here is your checklist for a comparison and contrast. What is your purpose? Are you trying to explain two different subjects, or are you trying to evaluate them? Will the purpose be clear to the readers from the beginning? It will if you have a good main idea or thesis. Your subjects that you are comparing and contrasting, are they alike enough, sharing enough common features to make a comparison worthwhile? Compare and contrast a steak and a new car? No. They have absolutely nothing in common. You have to have some common ground to work with. Thesis. Does your thesis establish a limited basis for comparison so that you have room and time to cover all relevant similarities and differences? In other words, make sure your topic is manageable. Don't make it so huge that you can hardly address anything in depth at all. That is the, America versus Russia, or American education versus Russian education. Keep it manageable, something you can stay on top of. Organization. Does your arrangement of material, whether it's by point or subject, help your readers follow the comparison? You don't want them getting confused or lost. So switching back and forth a lot between subject by subject or point by point, people can get confused. Now wait, am I talking, what? Is he talking about the steak here or the chicken? I'm confused. So make sure your paper is well organized. Balance and flexibility. Have you covered the same features for both subjects in a way that is interesting? inject some personal stories or some humor if humor is appropriate. Keep things lively. So there has it for you, comparison and contrast. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and we will see you again very soon.